All right. It's like 30 seconds after the previous one. I realized that my eye mask was upside down and inside out, I'm pretty sure. I thought it felt weird when I was using it. Um, I think it's funny that I use one of these airplane eye masks that I probably got from some flight a long time ago as my like blindfold, the Homeric blindfold. But whatever works, you know. It actually is interesting because I seem to come up with better ideas off the top of my head when I am blindfolded. So I guess there's something to this like idea of like the blind poet or whatever, but I don't think too much about it. I mostly do it because it's like an interesting. It's like not funny, but like a fun little sort of similarity to Homeric stuff. But yeah, it seems that I can concentrate better on the story when I do use this. Anyway, we're doing this story where Achilles is taking Eëtion's Thebes, is telling my own sort of Homeric story within the framework that's been established, the very loose outline that Homer describes. But I'm using as the skeleton of the story of the Irish hero Cú Chulainn, where Achilles would take the place of him. So what happened is that in the previous one is that Athena, as he was about to leave with his army to go save Phoenix from the city of Eëtion's Thebes, Athena told Achilles that there was another force approaching that Idomeneus was trying to fight, but that he would be undermanned to fight. And so Patroclus and the Myrmidons are going to go support that force, and Achilles alone with Automedon is going to kind of like engage in guerrilla warfare against the Thebans to at least to keep them at bay until the Myrmidons can show up. That's the idea. So let's see what happens. And thus, hearing those words from the gray-eyed goddess, Achilles disseminated his orders, and he did not notice that Talthybius the herald disintegrated into a puff of smoke behind him as Athena rose up to the heavens, content in her objective having been completed, and the legend of Peleus' son having thus been set on its path toward being solidified. And Achilles rose up in front of his Myrmidons, and he said to them, "Now, all of you great-hearted Myrmidons, I know that we have been raring for a real fight. We have been on these plains of Troy for a year now, picking off small targets and contributing to the whole, but we have not had a moment of valor of our own. Now it is our chance. We will be dividing our men, for there are two great objectives that we must achieve, and both are pressing. First, Idomeneus, that lord of Crete, with his man Meriones, must go out to take a huge force that reinforces the Trojans. Those Cilicians who stand in the wooded areas outside Troy are coming with a giant contingent, and we have just heard that they have been supported by a massive army of Thrace. We know not how they have combined forces or how they have met up, but if they are to come into Troy, we will have great trouble. And so I will be sending Patroclus, my attendant, and a great captain of you Myrmidons. He will come out, leading many of you, with Eumelus and with many others of the Myrmidon captains, all those others, that son of Hermes, and so many of the great ones, will lead you forth to support Idomeneus. I myself, with my man Automedon, we too will go out toward another objective, for it is said that those Thebans, who are led by Eëtion, the father of the princess of Troy, Andromache, they have somehow taken Phoenix. Yea, you all know that we have not seen Phoenix since Aulis, since our ships set forth from that accursed isle, and when I had been so cruelly hoodwinked by our Lord Marshal Agamemnon. Yea, Since that time we have not seen the lord of the Dolopians, and his men have sorely missed him, having instead been commanded by a smaller captain of the Thyians. And so we have now found that Phoenix is being held in that great towered city of Eëtion and of Tecmessa. Yea, that city where the king and queen both are warriors equal in fame, she being taught in the schools of those great Amazons out in the east, and he, having built up his fame, taking lands around the city of Troy for the glory of Priam and the Troad. And so I cannot crush that city on my own. I do not think that my rumored strength is enough to do something that great, but I have been told that there is a river that crosses Thebes, the path between Thebes and Troy, that goes all the way across, and that is deep and wide and fast flowing, and that there is but a single, very narrow area where men and beast and cart can cross. And such a force will have to go in a bottleneck formation through this river. And so I and my man Automedon will stake out on that river on the other side, and we will do our best to hold these overweening Thebans at bay. For they will not soon look upon the light of the sun if they deign to hold my guardian Phoenix in their clutches. Nay, they will rue the day that they have crossed Achilles and his Myrmidons. For once you have crushed that force of Cilicians and Thebans together, you will come back and support us from the side, and we will together raise that city to the ground until not a single man or woman or child inside the belly is still standing. Nay, we will erase them from the earth and make it as if they had never been. Thus spoke Achilles to his men, and all those captains and men, though they were confused, cried out and gave their shouts of approval, for they had been longing to win glory, and the faster that they could take down that huge supporting army, the faster they could help their captain and win the glory of the Myrmidons forever, and take back Phoenix, who so many of them looked upon with great reverence like a god among men. And thus was Achilles readying forth and sending his men to do that great deed. And thus would he begin those troubles which would cause him so much glory, but take quite a lot of sweat and turmoil before the end. All right, a cool one. Achilles giving his orders to the Myrmidons for what he's planning to do. There's a great thing in, I think it's an Egyptian, papyri and stuff that I forget which king, like Ramses III or something, was fighting the sea peoples, and he described it that he crushed their force so completely, and then he describes it that he'd made it as if they had never been. And I thought that was such an interesting way to describe like exterminating an army, like winning so completely that there's like no trace of them left. So I used that in Achilles' speech. And also in one of these previous episodes, I used a phrase, which I think is from a Hittite text, where one of the Hittite kings, I don't know, maybe Shupal-Liuma or something, but he said this great thing that was like, that I heaped dust upon them, which, is to say that he killed them and they would be buried upon inside the earth, and so dust would be heaped upon them. But just the phrase, I heaped dust upon them, is such a cool description of destroying an army or a man. And so I use that somewhere as well. As you can tell, it's not only Greek stuff. While I do read a lot of translations of the Iliad and Odyssey, and um, all the different Greek, things that are existent as I can find, as well as many like reference things that are about Greek stuff. I also try to read other cultural uh, legends and stories and stuff, mostly after I read that, what I was talking about before, the Robert Graves Greek myths, where he kind of makes the argument that so many stories come from the same or share their stories with each other. And I do find it's very rewarding to study many cultural uh, uh, ancient texts. I'm not really a big fan of reading like summaries of ancient stories or like modern retellings. There are a few that I really enjoyed. I liked Elizabeth Cook's story Achilles, which is super, like poetic. And I really liked Christopher Loeb's War Music, which I talk about a lot, which is also extremely poetic. The thing about those two that I like so much is that they don't actually make it any easier to understand the story. It's not meant for modern readers to like have an easier time getting it or to like turn it more into a novel. It's just a really poetic other way of telling the story of the Iliad. There are other really great ones like the Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and um, the there's a few of them by another author whose name I can't remember, who did Pandora's Jar and who did Natalie Haynes. And those are really good, although those are more like for the masses. They're meant to make it easier to understand. Stephen Fry also did a series of really entertaining sort of like retellings of the creation myths and the legends of heroes and stuff, and those are great too. But as you could probably tell from the stuff that I'm trying to do with this project, I'm not necessarily I'm shooting more for like Elizabeth Cook or Christopher Loeb, or the super great Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony, which is like the most incredible book I've ever seen on Greek stuff, it's like 50 different genres in one. That one's not necessarily telling the story, but it also is, and it's also not, and it's also super poetic, and it's also like a modern criticism, and it's also like a summary. It's a very interesting book. That's Roberto Colasso. But as you could tell by the stuff that I'm doing here, it's not necessarily attempting to make it any easier to understand. I'm using all the paternal names and all the epithets and all the names for the ancient names for the Achaeans and the Danaans and the whatever, and not necessarily making it like that. I'm trying to make it equally coherent to what Homer's story would be, which is to say that certain parts that in a modern novel would be like really fleshed out so that the viewer understands what's going on. Sometimes I'll kind of let those lapse and then detail out a part that doesn't seem important, which that's just part of how the experience of reading Homer or any ancient story goes. Like to that audience, that's what they wanted to hear, but to us, we tend to expect to hear different parts being fleshed out. And so I'm trying to do a story similar to that. And I think it's working pretty well. But yeah, I found it really rewarding to read a lot of these, like, even those two little quotes of like the heaped dust upon them and made it as if they had never been. Those two I read in Osprey's books about arms and armor of the Sea Peoples and of the second one was somebody else. Oh, and the Hittites, I guess, where they just happened to mention that, and that wasn't even about. I wasn't even reading anything about the legends or texts of the Hittites or of the Sea Peoples, who never left anything anyway, but that it just happened to show up. And it's interesting because there's so many places where you can find cool inspiration for stuff like that. So let's keep going with this. I'm really enjoying, obviously I love the project that we've been doing of telling the Iliad, through my remembrances, but this is kind of extra engaging because I have to come up with it entirely originally and make it feel like it's in that same world and also adapt another cultural story into this one. It's pretty interesting. I'd be fascinated to see if I could like refine this a little bit more and then like have it, you know, written down or something, and see how it looks on either on paper or just in one big, you know, like master performance where I would like do the official version of it. Because I feel like there's something here, like it's a pretty interesting outline for a story here, which fits into all the sort of existing material that survived of the Iliad and of anything about Achilles. So yeah, let's keep going with it and see what happens.